Your news, your views, your values. This is WMNF Tampa 88.5 FM.
The opinions presented on the Healthy Steps show are the evidence-based opinions of Dr. Fred Harvey, the callers, and his guests. These are not the opinions of the staff, the volunteers, or the board of WMNF. The information provided on the show is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease. There is no implied patient-physician relationship in these calls. The nature of the calls is educational and informational only.
Well, hello and howdy doody to you, my charming and gnarly friend out there in the infinite expanses of the radio land, and welcome to the Healthy Steps radio show here on WMNF Tampa, your resistance radio station from Tampa Bay to the Gulf of Mexico, and the only discerning little radio station that Winston Smith would ever dare to stream, and you can stream us as well at WMNF.org. Today is Ask Me Anything Monday, and that is a deep well of possibilities. The whole shebang depends on your questions, comments, and concerns. So let's keep Maddie, the supreme soul of the control room, busy this morning. Just give us a call at 813-239-9663. That number to call again is 813-239-9663. You are just 10 digits away from Dr. Fred. Or you can send an email to dj@wmnf.org. You can also text us at 813-433-0885. Well, good morning to you, Dr. Harvey. Of all of the days of the week that have an O in it, Ask Me Anything Monday is certainly my favorite. So let me loiter no more and let's get down to what's really real, your listeners and their AMA Monday concerns. What have you got to get us started today, Dr. Fred?
Well, starting off the week with a really beautiful day, I say.
Absolutely spectacular up here, too.
I'm so glad autumn is here. It feels so good. Went for a walk up in Tampa yesterday at the Lettuce Lake. What a beautiful place. Never been there before.
Neither have I. Tell me more.
It's worth the trip. It's about a mile and a half walk around the periphery, but as you go around, there's all these side trails that all come back to the main boardwalk, which takes you along this wetland next to the Hillsborough River. And it is just amazingly filled with birds and all kinds of stuff. Just beautiful place. So if you're in Tampa, Lettuce Lake is a great park to go visit. And very easy walk, too. Very accessible. Boardwalks go across the wetlands so you don't get your feet muddy. It's really very nice. I'm very pleased. And, it's a really good thing because we need to get out in nature. Nature helps us be healthy. There's some really good evidence about just doing a forest bath, which is what that is. It's a canopy walk. It's not out in the open, so you get lots of trees. You really get the benefit of being amongst all that living greenery. And it's autumn, so there's even a smell of decaying leaves, which is not the usual because we don't lose a lot of deciduous leaves here in Florida, but it had that autumn aroma, which I just adore. It's really spirit uplifting. And with all the stuff that's going around in our world currently, we need things to help uplift the spirits. National trauma is a real thing and it's ongoing, and we need to look at every opportunity to come together as a people and share joy rather than simply just protesting, although I know that is really important too. And I watched these protests that weren't protests. They were actually celebrations of America. There's nothing protesting about these rallies. America was founded on the idea of no kings, and the joy that people were experiencing was helping to actually improve their health because they were having fun out there in their costumes, dancing around and being nice and kind and celebrating and not fighting with anyone. That's community. That's beautiful. And we can build more community like that. This radio station is a place where we can go to really grow that community. And I really want to, again, tell everyone who donated this past fund drive how much I appreciate your involvement and suggest that we continue to support this community. Resistance is necessary when you're dealing with change that is regressive, obnoxious, cruel, and damaging to the health of our community. And, there's a lot of stuff out there that's damaging the health of our community. It's really interesting to see the mainstream media finally catching on to what we have been talking about in functional and holistic medicine since probably the mid-'60s, when Silent Spring was published. And that was the first major commentary on how pesticides are killing our planet. It's really stupid for humans to think that we can spread pesticides around to kill one organism, that it doesn't affect other organisms. Humans do really stupid tricks because they think they're isolated from the environment. There's a hubris that comes from an idea that we are here to dominate the planet. An erroneous teaching that comes out of an erroneous interpretation of some religious texts. And this idea of domination is just sick because we can't. We're part of it. We don't own this place. Land ownership is silly. We're only transients here. Planet's been here for 4 billion years, 5 billion years. To think that we can own a piece of land and call it ours is kind of silly. It's the land of everything that lives there. All of the organisms, and to think that we have the permission to poison it is sick. It's just flat out sick. Manifest destiny isn't real. It's a lie. We need to wake up to that, because we're seeing the effects of what extractive profiteering does. Capitalism assumes that there is a surplus from which profit can be extracted. There isn't any. It's a closed system. So if somebody extracts profit, somebody loses. And in our world, we support, in quotes, job creators, close quotes. They aren't job creators. They're corporations that eat humans for lunch. They are a commodity on the treadmill. They're not actually community builders. They're community eaters. And so we have this government now that is fascist, because Mussolini coined the term fascism to talk about how governments support corporations to control us all. And so in this situation, we see that our governments are supporting corporations like Monsanto Bayer to poison our food and then create the poisons that kill the cancers that are created by the poisons in our food. Think about that. And we talk about insanity being doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. I mean, we are a very insane culture because we aren't changing this behavior, and we're actually seeing more and more of the information come out. So the Washington Post, that rag owned by the oligarch Bezos, occasionally produces a piece of journalism that's worth reading. Iowa's great cancer mystery: is the land making young people sick? October 27, 5 a.m., this morning, published. They're finally talking about what we've been talking about for years. Teenagers are getting cancer in the corn-growing states. I think you heard my big sister Eve talking about this for a decade before me, and you've heard me talk about it for the 8 years I've been on the air. Synthetic chemicals like 2,4-D, that Agent Orange, the one they used in Vietnam to kill the jungle so they could have our troops walk through it and then get exposed to 2,4-D and come home with heart disease, brain disease, and cancers. Well, that's the same one they're actually putting on plants right now in the Midwest, because the glyphosate, the Roundup, isn't working because they've used it too much. They even had to do genetic manipulation. They did GMO plants to tolerate the Roundup, and now the weeds have figured out how to extract the GMO gene from the food plant, and so the weeds now have GMO Roundup resistance. So they're turning to use 2,4-dichlorophenoxyacetic acid, 2,4-D. And what they've shown with this, and then there's this other thing, it's another a plant antimetabolite called atrazine. Atrazine, we have the definitive data that it causes obesity and diabetes, but it does it through inflammation. So we look at these things that are evidence of oxidative stress or damage to the tissues, like malondialdehyde, MDA. That one is evidence that your system is being stressed beyond its tolerance limits. Prostaglandin F2A. This one is a fat, kind of like cholesterol, and it gets rancid, and we can measure that rancidity. We can measure rancid LDL cholesterol, because that's the stuff that actually attracts white blood cells and makes the blood even stickier so that you get heart attacks and strokes. And then my favorite one is 8-hydroxy-2-deoxyguanosine. That's a big bunch of syllables, but we can say 8-OHDG. Remember this one, 8-OHDG. I can measure this, and I do regularly on all my new patients and on repeats. I measure 8-OHDG, and I measure prostaglandin F2, because they're evidence that your body is damaged. But the worst thing is the 8-OHDG is evidence of rancid DNA. You don't want your DNA to be rancid, because that's what leads to mutation and cancer formation. What they have discovered in looking at people who live near the cornfields, they have elevated levels of 2,4-D and of atrazine, and they have oxidative stress markers that are elevated. So they have elevated markers of oxidative DNA damage. And so they are on the road to cancer. Just by being born in Iowa and living next to a cornfield where they spray this nasty stuff or spread it via plane and powder, they have shown that in the houses of the people that live there, in the carpeting, are high levels of these chemicals. And they're questioning how it is that teenagers in the Midwest next to these fields are getting cancer. I think they're a little confused and they need some help. I think reading a newspaper might help them. That's really crazy. Telling a scientist to read a newspaper to figure out what's going on in the cancer epidemic that's occurring across the Corn Belt in 16 to 38-year-olds. That's not a good thing. And I don't see that our current health department is doing anything about eliminating these herbicides from American agriculture. I haven't heard that one. That's the big one. Getting rid of a dye out of your Skittles is not relevant when you're looking at this size of a problem. And I'd like to talk about this size of a problem, and I think we have some callers.
We do, actually. I've got David, who's been waiting patiently, and Tom a little bit behind him, but I'm going to ask them to hold on just a second while I invite people. If you've just tuned on in, you are listening to the Healthy Steps Radio Show with Dr. Fred Harvey here on WMNF Tampa, and we're encouraging you to join the queue and give us a call and ask your questions or concerns. Just dial 813-239-9663. Joe's handling the phones today, so let's keep them busy. That number again is 813-239-9663, or continue to send your emails to dj@wmnf.org. Good morning to you, David. How are you today?
Hey, hi, everyone. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday, David.
Thank you. I called about a month ago, approximately, and you were very open to have a conversation about. Primarily, I believe most of our conversation was about children that did not get vaccinated from the Amish community. We kind of bounced that around a little bit back and forth about them. It was purported that they were more healthier. We also talked about Mennonites and things like that compared to the general population. So I just wanted to add something really interesting, Doctor. I know that, there was there was a documentary recently called The Inconvenient Study that was done by a nonprofit that I sponsor called the Informed Consent Network. So I watched it, and then it's really interesting. And then they cited a paper that was written by the folks from Henry Ford Medical Center, and it was also written by a very prestigious researcher, Dr. Zevros, Zerbos. In any event, they were asked to conduct a study by the nonprofit to look into the Henry Ford captive database to look at children that were never vaccinated versus children that were vaccinated. And they did a study of 18,000 kids. 16,000 had at least one vaccine, and 2,000 did not have any vaccines whatsoever. And then they looked at their risk for different conditions with those two groups, and they used a methodology that was actually outlined by the Institute of Medicine about a decade ago, who gave guidelines on how to conduct such a epidemiological study. And they found, basically, Dr. Harvey, they found that children that were vaccinated had a 2.5-fold increase in health conditions compared to unvaccinated children. And I can get into all. And they conducted a sensitivity analysis where they studied the effect of children who, there is a difference between the number of visits that a kid goes to, and you could make a case that to the doctor versus an unvaccinated kid. And they did find that children on average went 7 times a year to the doctors versus 2 times a year.
So I finally found a reference to this article you're talking about. It's unpublished, so that means no peer review occurred, it seems.
Yeah. So
basically, we don't trust this data because it hasn't been reviewed by peers. It's a draft of a medical study, but it's not a study. It's claims. It's like an anecdote. Somebody told a story.
Yeah. So if you watch this documentary, Dr. Harvey, thank you. I appreciate that, by the way. If you watch this documentary, what happened was the nonprofit asked Zervos to do a study. He's a very reputable researcher.
But the study never got done.
Well, it did get written.
Right.
But let me finish, and I'll shut up. They presented it to Zevros. They went to meet with him with a hidden camera at dinner, and they asked him. He gave the data. Zevros said, "This is a good study, but I can't publish it." And they asked him, "Well, why?" "Because it'll end my career, and I don't want to end my career."
I like gotcha documentaries like that, but I also like evidence, and even though there might be a paper that never got published that circulates around, nobody else followed up and did the subsequent study or published it or peer reviewed it. And so it's all nice conjecture, but I tend to avoid YouTube videos of documentaries because they don't tend to provide us with accurate information. They tend to be biased and they sell us a story.
Okay, doctor. Hey, no worries. Well, it was nice talking to you. Have a nice day.
You too, David.
Yeah, thank you very much, David. And again, I've got Tom waiting, and I'm going to ask your patience for just 2 seconds or a minute or so there, Tom. While I tell people you are listening to the Healthy Steps Radio Show with Dr. Fred Harvey here on WMNF Tampa. Would like you to join Tom and give us a call at 813-239-9663. I do have Maddie answering the phones now, so give her a call. That number, 813-239-9663, or continue to send your emails to dj@wmnf.org. Good morning to you, Tom. How are things in St. Pete?
Yeah, well, I guess about the same. A little overcast, but otherwise, summer's over.
That's true.
So I did have two things I want to get to, but I did look up while he was talking. The head of biostatistics at the University of Pennsylvania's Perelman School of Medicine,
Yes.
highly rated, found that the study did not meet the rigorous scientific standards we demand as a premier medical research institution.
That's generally what happens with these studies that make it to YouTube videos but don't get published.
Right, exactly. And when you don't see a peer review, that's that's a big flashing red light.
Yes, exactly.
Otherwise, these poor people in rural America that are exposed to these chemicals that are everywhere.
Yes.
It kind of makes me wonder if the MAGA movement isn't fueled by some sort of mental, distress.
Actually, it is. It is because what we know is that over the past 50 years, the rural America has been starved for adequate information. They have very low access. And so it seems that Fox News has penetrated the rural areas quite well. And so these people have been stressed because Fox News propaganda is about making people afraid. And so rural America has been programmed to fear everything because they watch Fox News, which is fear programming. It's not really news, and people that watch it should understand it's not news. It's not even entertainment. It's actually focused fear programming to get people to vote weird because they actually fear the things that they should be liking.
And watch out when you go to a Publix in a rural area.
Well, I'm planning on avoiding Publix because I don't plan on encountering anybody who's carrying a gun.
Right. But Andre, I did want to say that, if you buy vegetables in season, the organics are competitively priced with non-organic.
Yes.
Especially with local farms where they don't have the shipping costs of the California and the big major farms. Rolling Oats sells nothing but organics, pretty much. I haven't seen anything that's not organic. And their celery is always, almost all year round, the same price as regular celery. And when broccoli's in season, it's the same price and everything else. Green beans was cheaper than any grocery store when they were in season. At Rolling Oats, organic green beans were, I'm not going to say the price because I know I can't, but it was like less than half the price of some of the major grocery stores on the regular. Anyway.
Well, when you buy local and you don't have to ship it and you support local farmers, you really do support a very healthy economy and you support your own health because eating locally and eating seasonally is the way Ayurvedic practitioners teach us to eat because that's the way naturally our bodies are looking for those specific food types and calories at that specific time.
Yep, and I'll also shout out all these. They have a business model where they buy local, and their organic produce is pretty high quality, in my opinion, as well.
Yes,
but. Hey, the last thing I wanted to get to is about a year ago, I mentioned to you that I had a runny nose that would just come and go, and I was just learning to live with it. It's teaching me to breathe. But I found the cure to the chronic runny nose, and it's something I've been using for many years, and that's the neti pot.
Oh, neti pots are great.
Yeah. And I don't know how much experience you have. I don't expect anybody to know everything about everything. But you put one drop of oregano oil in a neti pot, and I smear it into the bottom of the stainless steel. And it's good for a long, it'll be fused into your salt water. And oregano oil is antibacterial, and I think it's antiviral too. And I tell you what, before I turned 60, I never took a flu vaccine. I wanted to get sick. I wanted my immune system to get strong, because after I turned 60, I don't want to get sick again.
Well, apparently your immune system was strong already because you didn't get sick.
Yeah, well, it's the first sign. If you use that neti pot as the first sign of that itch in the back of your sinuses, where you feel like you got to sneeze, that's a sign. That's a sign. Your body is telling you that something's in there that you don't want to be in there. And if you let it stay there, it's going to grow. And
exactly.
once it gets out of control, you're trying to play catch up. And it's better to get ahead of this stuff than to be behind it.
I agree. Another good thing to throw in your neti pot is a clove of crushed garlic. Put it in your measuring cup, and then put your hot water into that with the baking soda and salt, and then filter it. Pour it through a sieve so that you don't get chunks of garlic. But the garlic is super antifungal, antiviral, and antibacterial. Hey, Tom, thanks for those tips today. Great talking with you.
Yeah, that's what you answered my question. Thank you, buddy. Cheers.
Thank you there, Tom. And I do have Norm on the line. Good morning, Norm.
How you doing, Dr. Harvey?
Good, Norm. How are you today?
I'm hanging in here. While we have the information age, I was listening to one of those callers talk about vaccines and stuff. What we've also created is an age of what I call promotion of public health stupidity, in which
explain that, please.
Well, what I'm saying is there's people that promote that have promote superstition, or what I call these mysticism and hyper realities and those sort of things, over what is that which is science and that which is facts. And well, the problem then becomes that a lot of this, unfortunately, a lot of this misinformation then becomes part of public health policy by folks who are able to get elected and carry an agenda. And if you say something long enough and loud enough, even though it's completely wrong and void of facts, then folks have a tendency, particularly those people who do not do the research or to follow behind or whatever, But
sure. There's a lot of misinformation out there.
And here's one of the things that's really sad is, for example, the use of fluoride in water to reduce dental decay. And there was a study years ago done by a friend of mine, Dr. Singford. She was out of Howard University. She was a woman that she became one of the first female dean of a dental school in America. But anyway, she had previously done work and noted, quite importantly, that putting fluoride in water reduced dental decay 60%.
Yes.
And of course, at the University of Michigan, we had that it was well known that the Grand Rapids study and those sort of things. And, this is pretty well accepted, and it did work. I mean, you did see this in areas. So then I happened to go to work in Tallahassee, and back in the 80s, and I noticed that a large percentage of probably it was horrific. It was like you would step back into the dark ages when you looked at folks' teeth, and especially the children. You see these incipient cavities, and it was so, terrible that you would look at one kid. I mean, the older kid, you knew almost instinctively what the younger kids were looking at. You could see the pattern as they go in terms of dental decay. And, of course, they didn't have fluoride in water, and they did eventually put fluoride in water in the state of Florida. And believe it or not, unfortunately, the state, in many cases, and even policy, was that there were going after dentists for in terms of doing too many fillings or too many. That was the state's policy or whatever, the ignorance that we had there. And it really resulted, a lot of it had to do with racismo, in that, certain populations were being denied or prevented from getting care and that sort of thing. And this thing,
they did find that truly that in the people with limited dental care access, which would be like rural America, they had the biggest evidence of reduced tooth decay. So it's for people that don't get to dentists and don't get to brush their teeth and don't get good care. They're the ones that get the most benefit. People that get good care don't get as much benefit. And there are some concerns about it, but they're kind of low. However, it's interesting that they talk about how you could have some legitimate concern because you start getting dental fluorosis, white spots on the teeth. That occurs at 1 part per million or thereabouts. And in Sarasota County, there's already 1.4 to 1.7 parts per million in the natural water. You don't even need to add any.
Yeah, well, you brought up a point which I was getting ready to get to. There's a town up there. It was Brunstown in Bristol. And you noticed that the kids, I think it was either Brunstown, their teeth they had no decay, okay?
Yeah.
But they also had brown fluorosis, is what we used to call it, And what happened, again, you talk about that in certain areas, the water is naturally fluoridated, okay?
Right.
But one thing you do see is you don't see decay, but you do see what we call fluorosis or staining when the amount of fluoride gets above, 1 part per million.
Exactly.
So, and you see that fluorosis, although the fluoride, although it may increase the integrity or the strengthening of the enamel, it also can cause brittleness, if it's at a very high amount. So that's something that we're aware of.
That's brittle bones will happen, but that's when you get 10 times the added exposure that most governments would do.
Yeah, but again, this is all part of public health policy that we noticed. When you develop policy, you say, well, we're going to remove fluoride, okay, at an amount of 1 part per million from water. What you're going to see, because what I saw in Tallahassee, that's stuff that we would see. When we were in Michigan, we just see on the videos and stuff, rampant dental decay and
yes, exactly.
You just visualize. And the thing was that when they did put fluoride in water, it did reduce the amount of dental decay.
Exactly. And so you're right about ignorance here. You're really right about people being ignorant.
That's just a small example. And we see it, again, the same thing occurring with vaccines. A lot of us are lucky because what happens is that, because of what we call herd immunity, that's why we're alive. Because most of the folks who sit here and say, well, we don't need this and that, the only reason they're living is because we have these conditions. It's been shown that, what caused people to live longer was sanitation,
it's not the vaccines that are increasing lifespan. It's actually sanitation that gave us the biggest bump there.
Sanitation, and I guess medications, new medications that are being better.
Medications aren't increasing lifespan.
Right. So, I mean, and
it's actually common sense if it were common that it increases lifespan.
Well,
don't poop in your water. Don't poop on your food. Eat a rainbow of food. Get exercise. Get good sleep, and have good relationships, and you pretty much have it licked.
But here again, we can talk about exercise and those sort of things. But however, I mean, folks, long time ago. I mean, when you talk about 100 years ago, yeah, you didn't just get in a car and just drive here and there. You walked. You worked all day and worked all night. You know?
Right. You worked in your garden to grow some food. You walked where you were going. No, we have a completely different society.
But it is accelerated, but it also caused accelerated injury, and people didn't live as long.
Right. So that's why we see for the first time in decades that the American average lifespan has decreased because we're so toxic, we're so sedentary, and we are being ignorant about major health issues, thinking that pills can solve our ills. And the people that are in power right now, Norm, the people that are in power right now have a obvious, distinct goal of hurting all of the rural poor people. All of their policies are designed to make the rural poor suffer. Everything they're doing is about making the rural poor suffer, which is going to decrease the entire health of our whole nation because the rural poor are being hurt by the current administration on a purposeful basis because they want them to feel pain.
Yeah, Dr. Harvey.
For bringing this up.
Let me spin it this way. Okay, that you're speaking from an American perspective. Okay.
Well, yeah, I live in America.
Let me tell you something. I happened years ago to go to Cuba. Okay. All right.
Yeah, and Cuba has one of the best healthcare systems in the Western Hemisphere.
You're absolutely, and you see. I mean, it's a total different approach. I mean, for example, the one thing they noted was in their health system was when you look at you had the same sort of diverse population too, by the way. You know,
yes.
But in the black population, they point out the one thing that they see that black folk had was they had high blood pressure. However, one thing they noted that they all had the same life expectancy. You know, there wasn't this disparity of 10 and 15 years apart, and women,
right?
And everybody had the same life expectancy.
That's because there's only one race. That's because there's only one race, the human race. There's no real medical difference between any of us.
Something else that
you got that, Norm? You understand that one? There is no difference between the races.
Right.
Because there's only one. We all have the same medical physiology. And I love talking with you, Norm, but I have more callers, so I think we better move on today.
All right, let me get this one point, too. That one thing, and I'll tell you. The one thing that has happened, and we don't talk about, when we embargo Cuba and stuff, one of the things we embargo was gasoline. So the point is that what happens when you embargo folks with gasoline? How do they get around? Bicycles. And what is a bicycle going to do to you? Or what is it?
It's going to make you more healthy.
It's going to make you more healthy. And that's what's happening there. And
exactly.
They treat old people differently. You start exercising. Old folks, they exercise and stuff like that, And
yes.
And it's just,
the biggest problem for old folks in America, the reason most women end up...
is a jewel, It's
yes.
I'll let you run, man, because I'm going to start preaching to you again, and I'm going to have to ask me for an offering here. But anyway, thank you so much, Brother Harvey. I appreciate the hollering at you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you there, Norm. And yes, I've got Chris and Joel on the line, so let's go to Chris. Good morning, Chris.
Hi, Chris.
Oh, hi, Doctor. Good morning. I just emailed you some information on a few things. If you have a chance to check them out, growing fascism, corporatism with the pesticide makers, that several states are introducing bills to prevent liability, to shield the pesticide makers of liability.
You know what? I just read that the big one in Nebraska failed, and Bayer is pissed off. They paid too much money to those legislatures to have their protection bill against the cancers they cause passed. It failed. Hallelujah. These people are going to get reined in. It's time to end fascism in America. How about it? I'm an anti-fascist. How about you?
Absolutely. Right. The merger of corporations and state is, as Mussolini termed, that's what fascism is. And, well, if you look at the bronze engravings on either side of the podium of the dais and Senate and the House, you see the Roman fasces there. So it's obvious what their intentions are. They're proud of it.
Yes.
And also, I sent you the preprint of that Henry Ford Health study, and it's the 8th of its kind. There were others that found similar comparisons where the children's health outcomes, comparing the vaccinated to the unvaccinated, the vaccinated were poorer health outcomes, or the partially, according to the CDC's recommended schedule, they were medium, had the medium health outcomes. So, and the best, of course, were the completely unvaccinated, according to these studies. And the neti pot, I emailed you this also, that in the other nasal washes that prevent the bacteria and viruses from colonizing the upper respiratory tract several days, maybe up to a week before they colonize the lungs. So daily nasal washes should have been promoted by our government to stop the spread of the coronavirus. And
I'm totally surprised that the CDC doesn't recommend nasal health. I mean, simple things that could really help. I don't understand why it gets ignored. I really don't know what the purpose is of not talking about these good things.
Yeah, well, the Federal Trade Commission is still attacking Clear, or XLEAR. It's xylitol nasal wash. Which, by the way, xylitol is also good for preventing bacteria. They think that it's sugar, and they're not able to derive energy from it, so they die. But, Nate Jones was interviewed on the High Wire with Bell Bigtree on May 23rd, 2025, about that, where he mentions that Clear was shown to prevent, have 100% efficacy to prevent COVID-19 infections. And the Federal Trade Commission just has, as you may know, a horrible record. Jonathan Emord, the attorney, has beaten them 8 times. He's called the FDA Dragon Slayer. Of course, the FDA breaks the regulations, FTC executes them. And every time the judge makes the ruling against the FDA or FTC, the government just ignores those rulings. And
yes, our government tends to ignore its own laws. We see that regularly right now in this administration. And there's a study that was done in 2022, published July 23. Let's see. It says that both xylitol and saline were equally effective in decreasing the time of symptom resolution and preventing hospitalization. Yet persistent anosmia was seen in the saline group. Intranasal xylitol might play a pivotal role in preventing persistent olfactory abnormalities in post-COVID-19. That's the only one I've seen so far. There's possibly some others out there. But there are so many different ways of dealing with these things that have impact but weren't talked about. And even some of the ones that were studied, they made up data to make it look like it didn't work, like with ivermectin. They made up the data on that study. 91% effective at reducing mortality by 70%. They didn't publish that, or they published it and said it didn't work because it didn't meet 95% confidence interval. 91% versus 95%, and they let how many million people die because they were not recommending ivermectin, which reduces mortality better than the shots.
Yeah, FDA tweeted, and they retracted the tweet saying that you're not a horse or a cow, so don't do it. But Dr. Mary Tyler Bowden, I'm not sure her middle name.
Yeah,
Mary Tyler Bowden,
the one in Texas,
able to get the FDA to stop that, to retract that tweet. But it'd be nice if they would correct themselves as well, to say, "Oops, we were wrong again this time."
Yeah, it would be nice, but
it's just want to get another experimental treatments, the COVID shots into people's arms, but. So, because we've put up with this for so long, another example with the water fluoridation, there's no safety testing.
I still don't, Chris, I still don't understand why they did the genetic experiment with the COVID mRNA instead of using the COVID spike protein, which Novavax had available. They blocked it. And I still don't understand why it was so important to get the mRNA into arms in America, where we had the most shots in arms and still had the highest mortality per capita. Why didn't we try to reduce that mortality with ivermectin? I'm still confused as to what that was about.
Yeah, I just don't know of any studies, if someone could find them for me, showing that the COVID-19 shots actually saved lives. And not the reverse. But just to move on to water fluoridation, what self-respecting scientist would conduct a safety study on the phosphate mining's industrial waste, which is replete with the heavy metals and radioactive isotopes? That's the most toxic form of fluoride, and it's
not the one that's used generally in our water treatment systems.
Well, it is these days. They started with the sodium and stannous fluoride, which are in dental products, but now then they moved, which are the mediocre, most toxic. The least toxic are naturally occurring, like calcium or magnesium fluoride, which are insoluble. But the synthetic ones, like I mentioned, phosphate mining's industrial waste, which is the most toxic, is soluble, as well as the sodium and stannous fluoride, which are.
But I haven't seen any evidence anywhere published that they're doing anything besides fluoride going into the water. Most use pure fluoride, and it's not contaminated with a bunch of other metals because they also test the water for those metals. So I don't believe that one, Chris. I'd like to see that evidence.
You can get the material safety data sheet from wherever they're fluoridating, like I did from Pinellas County before they stopped.
I'd love to see that one. But in the meantime, thank you, Chris. I've got another two callers on the line.
Yeah, thank you very much there, Chris. I do have a couple people for you here. I've got Joel and Julie. Let's go to Joel in Tampa. Good morning, Joel.
Howdy, Doctor. Thank you. I'm Joel from Tampa. You were talking about power earlier, and the power is in nature.
Yes.
Clearly, the power is in nature, natural hygiene, and a healthy lifestyle.
Yes.
That includes the earthing in the garden, in a forest or a park, and having good friends. A healthy lifestyle gets you so far down the road. The recent experience of an emergency of 2 days at Tampa General Hospital showed me the absolute futileness, the brokenness of a academic, scientific, medical system. And
why? What happened, Joel?
I was my own advocate. I had
you have to be.
What they detected was an enlarged prostate at 79 years old.
Okay.
And there was some obstruction that caused my bladder to fill 32 ounces or more.
Wow.
And I was a sick puppy. I had to call emergency. It was really puzzling for this health food nut. Anyway, I went there and they put a catheter in my urethra and damaged it, and it hurt for about 6 hours, but they drained most of the water out of my bladder and most of the symptoms were gone. I was ready to go home. And they said, we want to transfer you to Tampa General because your sodium level is low. And that was real bullshit. So they transferred me to Tampa General 4 a.m. And that next night at Tampa General, I got no sleep. And the food they tried to serve me I wouldn't feed to anybody. And the cream of the academic crop, these nurses and doctors who survived medical school and nursing school, I saw operating in an impossible system of health care, of disease care. It was horrible, Doc. It was. I felt like hooked up to the tubes. I felt like a prisoner.
Yeah, it does feel like that sometimes.
I wrote a letter to my admitting doctor at 3:00 in the morning when I couldn't sleep. And he came in about 10 or 11, and I read it to him. And I said, I've been successful in reversing chronic disease of psoriatic arthritis. I need to be home because this is ineffective and not helping me. And please release me. He says to me, we can remove the catheter and let you wait 6 hours until you void, or I can remove the catheter and let you go now. I said, now. I couldn't wait to get out of there. So in 44 hours, and Doc, the blessing for me with 36 years of study, teaching, and hosting radio shows is that I was my own advocate.
You have to be in any situation like that, but the doctors actually have your interest in mind. And so what you presented with was a prostatic hypertrophy that got inflamed and then obstructed your urethra. When that happens, it's so tight there that to get a catheter into your bladder is always painful because you have basically clamped down that area and you can't pee. And so to have a quart of urine stuck in there for who knows how long, backing up into your ureters, into your kidneys, changes the way your kidney function goes. So this is probably a chronic situation because that's why you likely got low sodium, because your kidneys were dysfunctional from the backup of water in your system. And so
they gave me an IV of sodium, Doc.
Yeah, exactly.
They wanted to put another IV in, and another blood test came back and said your sodium's back to normal.
Good.
Well, you know what? I had sodium in the cell systems, but not in solution.
Right.
They were only testing solution.
Well, they have to test the solution because that's the way we test it. And what they tested was appropriate.
But the fact is, I didn't need pint after pint after sodium.
Actually, you did. You did because they gave it to you and your sodium got better. So they did the right thing by you. And I would have kept you there 2 days because urinary obstruction comes back usually as soon as you take the catheter out. And
you
so
leave me in there for 10 days with a catheter in there.
I would have said 2, but you're looking at a reobstruction. So I would get to a urologist right away and find out what next.
I got an appointment.
Very good. Yeah. Have a great day, Joel. I got to move on. We're down to the last minute.
Thank you, Doc.
You're welcome.
Okay. Julie, can you do this in a few seconds?
Hi, Julie.
Hi, Dr. Harvey. How are you?
Excellent. How are you?
Good, thank you.
What have you got? Well, we've just lost you, Julie.
Yeah, I think that's the case. If you got an email or so, we can wrap up with that.
Let's see. What do we have here? Hey, I'm recovering from a major complex lumbar spine surgery. All are recommending collagen supplementation. That's fine, but I would eat protein. Make sure you get like 90 to 110 grams of protein a day, somewhere around that range. You can take collagen, but if you just eat good protein, you're getting the same components. I like to roast the chicken, slow roast, 275 for like 3 hours. By that point, the collagen in the joints has turned into jello. I love to eat chicken joint cartilage. A lot of people get grossed out by it, but boy, oh boy, that's a great source for collagen and glycosaminoglycans, which build your joints. So on that, have a great day, and don't consider a product if you're thinking about collagen unless you really want to take protein powders. Thanks again for a great engaged show. Always love talking with you folks, and thank you, Bill, for producing. Thanks, Joe, for answering the phones, and thank you, WMNF community, for another wonderful week.
And one more thank you. Thank you there, Dr. Fred, for another wonderful show. Really appreciated it. Got an awful lot of good ideas out there, and a lot of people, I'm glad, participated. And I want to thank Maddie for answering the phones today. She did a great job. And everyone on out there, till next Monday, I'd like to say thank you for supporting and listening to WMNF. And I couldn't have done the show without Maddie. So everybody out there, take care, stay healthy. You have been listening to the Healthy Steps Radio Show with Dr. Fred Harvey here on WMNF Tampa. Coming on up next is 5 minutes of NPR News, followed by the Sustainable Living Show, hosted today by Annie Ellis. So until next Monday at 10 a.m., thank you for supporting and listening to the Healthy Steps Radio Show with Dr. Fred Harvey here on WMNF Tampa, your community conscious radio station. Stay safe, stay thoughtful, and know that you are loved.